So welcome everyone. Dennis is sick tonight, so I'm stepping in for Dennis tonight. So, and then I spoke to Dennis on the phone, and he gave me a bit of a rundown on what he had been doing, and I'm not going to do that. What he was so. Anyway, I think one of the beauties of the Monday nights is that each person that does the Monday nights tends to have their own leaning as to what they cover, and so over a period of time you get quite a variety of different approaches. So look, my name's Damien, and so a little bit of what Dennis has been talking about is under the heading of the precious human rebirth, So, and all of the Monday night teachers struggle a little bit in whether to present that in the traditional manner, which is done, traditionally, and Probably it's done traditionally in Tibet or originally in India, where the general population had already had a cultural understanding or a cultural belief system in some of the foundations for that discussion about precious human rebirth. So today in our society here, I think to a large degree some of those elements are absent. And so it becomes more difficult to talk about these things in the traditional way that they would be discussed. However, the message is still very important to understand. And so, in the Monday nights that I did just 2 months ago, I also talked about that fundamental question, but I don't think I used the term precious human rebirth very much. I might have mentioned it once or twice, but I talked about the idea that we are a life form. We are a life form. And in the same way, dogs, cats, horses, cheetahs, armadillos, ants, bees, everything, all these things, we can say they are life forms. So, and we are all similar in that we possess this life energy. Whatever that life energy is, we are similar in that we all have this life energy, being alive. Okay, so we can think of this in like a scientific thing, that there is a commonality between us and all other living things. And so in this essence of being alive, and we can look at the tiniest insect and sort of say, it's alive, and then something happens, it's dead. We can recognise that alive quality, being alive. So if we approach this from sort of like a scientific basis, and we said all these different creatures are common in having a life, whether an ant, an insect, a snake, whatever. We're all common in that aspect of having a life. So, and the question that I posed, a couple of months back was, why is it, why is it that we are so lucky in terms of the hierarchy of life experience? on earth? Okay, we don't have to answer that question in a way, and that's particularly where Buddhism tries to offer an answer to that question. But let's say we don't actually have to answer that question, and we just take it as a given that we are so fortunate to have this human life, when so many other life forms have a much more perilous experience than what we have with life. So then this is where we can then start to think about just for myself, I can think that, well, I don't know how it occurred, but I created the cause for this life. We can take responsibility and say, okay, there's this huge different types of life forms, but I created the cause for this life that I have now. So I don't have to feel guilty about having such a great life. We can take the responsibility and say, I created the cause for this life, good on me, So no need to feel guilty. Right? Even though we are surrounded by life forms that are nowhere near as lucky as I am. Okay, so then the question comes, you have a beautiful day like today, and the circumstances that we live in are peaceful, abundant, pleasant, beautiful. We have everything that we could require in terms of food and clothing and housing and entertainment. So many things that we have are in great abundance and easily accessible. So, and let's say again, I can take credit for that. I've created the cause for me to enjoy that. There's no need to feel guilty or unworthy of that. In fact, it's beneficial. It's beneficial for us to actually think how fortunate I am that I have this precious human life. And even on the scientific level, this, just looking at merely the other life forms, we think, how fortunate am I to have this life form when we look at all of the other possibilities in the world. How fortunate I am. And we can think that somehow or other, I have also created the cause for this. All right. So what we can then start to do is to look at the reality of this life, and in particular the fragility of this life. And even though we may not want to particularly look at it, that the hourglass of our life is rapidly running out. And certainly the older you get, I think the more rapid that appears to be. And I saw a little interview with Barry Humphries where he was asked about his experience of growing old. And he said that one of his friends, I think it was when he turned 80, one of his friends had bought him an hourglass. And so he put it on his side table, and he said he would keep turning it over as quickly as he could so that it would never run out. And so he saw that as greatly symbolic of the situation that he was in, that, the sands of time are just rapidly running out. And so it's the idea in Buddhism of contemplating your precious human rebirth in conjunction with impermanence and death is to really get a sense of this life is very precious, really special opportunity. And we can take comfort that somehow or other I did create this cause. I did create the cause for this life. I may not recognise exactly how I did that, but we can be confident and even to a certain degree, I was going to use the word proud, but that's maybe not quite the right term, but we feel very privileged, or that somehow or other I had created the cause for this life. However, the fragility and the time is running out aspect start to become something to consider, to actually consider the fragility of life, and to consider that the rapid erosion of the time that you have left in life, to start to think, okay, if I created the causes for this life, how can I create the causes for the same thing again? How can I create the causes so that I have this type of life again, and not one of the I think the number is 10 to the 40th or something, other living beings in the world. Like there's a huge number of pretty undesirable life forms that are a lot less advantageous than this human life. From even on a minute-to-minute basis, our experience of life is so much better than the vast majority of other creatures on earth. And so we can say that an awful lot of Buddhism is geared around trying to give us the tools to create this life again, at the very least, to create a good human life again, with all of the good conditions that we have. So the question that sort of comes to my mind is, how do we maintain the rage? Let's say we look at it that way. How do we maintain the rage of being focused on that task when it's such a beautiful day, and we walk around and we go into Chadstone, or we go into the city, we have a coffee and a cake, and we sit in the sun, and we enjoy every moment of this beautiful day with no thought whatsoever about the impending doom that we all face. And we do that day after day after day. We don't actually embrace this problem very well at all. We come here on a Monday night, or I go to the teachings on Tuesday night and Wednesday night, and so for maybe a flash of a moment in the teaching, I might consider this question. But the rest of the time, I'm thinking about going into the city and having a cake at Brunetti's and a coffee and wandering around, look at the river, go down to the beach, let the sun just warm me up and feel fantastic. Completely ignorant of my actual future demise. So the question then that I pose to myself is, how do I maintain the rage to actually be focused on Dharma practice? or really being mindful about my thinking, about my developing love and compassion, trying to minimize my delusions and all this sort of thing, when I actually have this fantastic circumstance. You know, how do we maintain that rage of doing something about our circumstances for the future? You know, because our life relatively is really so good. And I think for all of us, no matter what faith you follow or what non-faith you follow, or whatever your circumstance, I think this is one of the great quandaries of life, is you know, how to motivate yourself to be able to stay focused, even just occasionally, on what might be beneficial for the future, and to prevent creating harm for my own future by being completely mindless about what is important and what is not important. And traditionally there are meditations to do, but the same problem ensues, that there are all these meditations to do, but I don't do them. You know, it's the same. It comes down to the same nuts and bolts question about how to be motivated about doing something about our life situation. And that applies, you know, in this case, to the thinking about trying to create a good future existence, but even momentarily about having good reasons not to be angry, or having good reasons not to be jealous, not to be competitive, you know, not to be smug, not to be prejudiced, not to be aggressive, you know, not to be lustful, you know, sort of swallowed up by incredible attachment. You know, how to motivate yourself to tackle any of these issues, I think, is the great challenge of, certainly the great challenge of Buddhism. So that's what I've been thinking about. If anybody, you know, because I'm standing in for Dennis, if there's any sort of questions that somebody's been thinking about for a while or would like to bring up, yeah, open the floodgates, eh? Yeah, sure.
Well, just on that point, I mean, a lot of people are extremely stretched for time. I do want to ask you later about the US elections. I'll come to that later, but I think it sort of goes to what is on top of a lot of people's minds. It's like, you know, the cost of living, and it explains a lot of what we've seen recently. But, you know, there are an enormous number of people who are absolutely stretched, fully stretched emotionally, financially, and they feel that they have very little space in their lives for anything. And it would seem to me that for people who feel that sort of situation, it's like perhaps lesser things count for a lot. So if you're under massive pressure at work and surrounded by people who've lost their jobs, for example, absolutely stretched at the moment. It's almost like a luxury for them to just find a bit of, I guess a bit more compassion, for want of a better word, in their very stressed lives.
Yeah, so the question is sort of just pointing out that a lot of people do feel very pressured under work, mortgage stress, rental stress, cost of living, job difficulties, job insecurity, and it's not as rosy as you think. Is that the bottom line? Yeah. So
a lot of people, massive numbers of people, would see their lives and actually believe their lives to not be.
yeah. So
battle for survival.
yeah. So and somebody's thinking can definitely become embroiled in that difficulty to the point of great distress. There's no question. And so one of the, techniques for low self-esteem and despondency, that sort of personal lack of worth feeling, like extreme difficulty, is to recollect the relative goodness of a human life in general, and the precious human life in terms of the Buddhist terms in particular. So, and I'm not diminishing the way that people feel about their circumstances, but relatively they are still at the pinnacle of the life forms on earth, relatively. And that, it doesn't make those problems go away, but it just shows you that things can be an awful lot worse, So, for instance, the general description of the animal kingdom, let's call it the animal kingdom, whatever that term means, is that animals are constantly in fear of being eaten by another animal, And in general, that's not something we ever feel, like it's not one of our problems. And you mentioned just the idea of the election, and I think again for us here in Australia, now there's a significant number of people in America who are facing the idea of being repatriated to somewhere or other. But, and so, millions of people in that situation are now thinking that their lives are going to be completely upended. And that, there's no question that that is a mental turmoil for those people. So, but still, the relativity of our circumstance is just so much better than the alternatives, than any other life form. And so, the traditional idea is to look at that aspect as a way of reducing how you see your problems, how much that you think your problems are. There's, sort of like, it sounds like a trivial thing, but there's somebody a lot worse, but that is a technique to make you feel a little bit better, and that you can then deal with that circumstance. But it still doesn't, it doesn't matter whatever problems we have, it still doesn't make us go to the bottom of that life pyramid, doesn't do anything to that, to our, our circumstance is still so good. And that's the way I think that's the way we should approach it, to really think, how good is this circumstance? And then think, how can I have it again? But not thinking, I wouldn't want a human life again because I might have a mortgage, like, You know, that's a first world problem, you know, like, not to think like that, but, you know, how terrible would that be? Whereas you look at all the other life forms and there's somebody chewing on their toes just as they, you know, as they wake up. So, yeah, I think get things in perspective a bit. Yeah.
Plants get into this life. We talk about the life sort of circle thing. Where do the plants get into this?
So the question is, where do the plants get into the thing? I'm excluding plants from this discussion. I don't know. I don't particularly think plants are in this idea of actually having a sentient life force. You know, I mean, that's, I think it's sort of, you can, if you feel like including them, you can include them. But, yeah, from a Buddhist point of view, plants are not sentient. They respond to stimulus like water or sunlight or an insect walking on their leaf and they clench up or whatever. You know, they do all these things. And I can't see it, but the general view is that the plant does not possess a mind, whereas even some tiny, tiny creatures possess a mind. And, you know, that division, you know, I don't think there's any particular sort of reason to be hung up on that, but just to think at some point there are things that do not have a mind and things that do have a mind, you know. So, yeah.
Well, speaking of minds, what aspect of our mind gets reborn?
So the question is, what aspect of our mind gets reborn? It's a good question. So, the mind is defined as that which is clear and knowing. And what that means is that it is clear in the sense that there is nothing in the mind that obstructs knowing objects. And that it is clear in the way that it then reflects an object and it is able to know, by that reflection of the object, it knows the object. So it's this sort of awareness thing, right? So then for us, there's this basic innate awareness, and then there, on top of that, there's a whole layers and layers of constructed thinking, conceptualization, and sort of fabrication of mental models and constructions and cultural things, all this sort of stuff. So a lot of that stuff is just limited to this life, the conceptual thinking. So there are a whole range of different conceptualizations that occur, and emotions and feelings and all this. And then underlying that is a sort of a subtle essence of the mind, right? A subtle nature of the mind. So at the end of this life, at the time of death, all the various levels of conceptualization and sensory experiences gradually cease, and the mind becomes more and more subtle, but still connected to the body. So during the death process, there's still a sort of like a connection, and the mind becomes more and more subtle and subtle until it gets down to some sort of very minimal essence of the mind.
Would that essence be like a newborn baby?
No, so the question is, the question is whether that's like a newborn baby, even more subtle than that, really down super subtle, until eventually that a very subtle element of the mind separates from the body at the time of death. Now, that sort of mind, I'll just call it mind, somehow carries with it the karmic impressions that we've created. right? The instinctive habituations are somehow carried on that subtle mind. And so we take that to the next life. But we can't take our PIN code from the bank. We can't take a whole lot of other stuff with us. But that carries, somehow carries our habituations of thinking, of not just thinking, but mind. So, but even with a newborn baby, it's already got a more extensive mental activity happening than that very subtle mind.
So if I came back as like an elephant or something, would the elephant have any characteristics that I possess now?
It would possess, so the question is, if you came back as an elephant, would it possess any of the same characteristics? It would possess the same continuum of mind, but the causes that have created that elephant rebirth are somewhere maybe over here, and they give then a result which might be quite vastly different to this life, So there's no guarantee that this life that I have today, that will automatically be my next life, some people believe that the life forms sort of steadily rise up in spirituality or sophistication or something, but not from a Buddhist point of view, that the next life that we have, that the process is, look, if you can read up on this in quite great detail, but so at the time of death, the mind separates from the body, and the body is left behind as a corpse, right? And nobody wants it. After a few days, like they say, it doesn't matter how attached you are to a person, after 3 days, you'll want to get rid of their body, because the mind, the enlivening aspect of the mind is gone, and so the body deteriorates. So the mind then goes. And then our minds are such that because we are caught in cyclic existence, we have to attach ourselves to another life. We don't have any choice. So there's sort of like a force in us to have to attach to another life of some sort. And what that is determined momentarily by the force of our own past actions. So whatever is strongest or most familiar or has the circumstances that cause it to ripen, that then causes us to take up a new life form. And it can be up or it can be down. And it all depends on the circumstances, particularly around our death, but also our own dispositions as to what is strongest, what is most immediate, what is the most prevalent and what is the most intense. And at the time of death, the circumstance of our death is to what ripens that karma, to come to the forefront. And that will determine what your next life is. But there's a possibility that if you're a very generous person in this life and you get reborn as a dog or something, you probably will be a very generous dog. And you see that. You'll see that with animals. The YouTube and all these reels and that are full of this stuff of animals doing extraordinary, compassionate and generous things to either humans or to other animals. You see that. But not all of them, So that's an indication how each person, and I use the term person very broadly, not meaning humans, but a person, sentient being carries with them their own dispositions. And so for that reason, not every human is the same. Not every dog is the same. Not every cat is the same. Not every lion, not every elephant is the same. Because they are individually expressing their own dispositions. And yeah, so I don't know if that answers your question, but so let's do a little bit of meditation. So meditation is very important because it gives us some mental tools to be able to really tackle these questions, tackle them in a productive way. And also, meditation will be the tool that actually enables us to maintain the rage or maintain the focus on what's important in life. So we can use that as a motivation for our meditation. To be able to create a good future existence for myself and to be able to benefit others and not to harm others. So sort of generate that motivation. And then bring all of your thoughts within yourself, letting all of that conceptual thoughts drop away. And then turn your attention to the breath and just focus 100% on the breath. And in particular, the sensation of the breath and the mental awareness of that sensation. Try to focus on the mental awareness of the breath as it comes in and goes out. And just 100% on that awareness for the next few minutes. So just holding that level of concentration. So seeing, we've discussed a little bit about this subtle, or this mind, the essence of mind. We can try in meditation to try to look at that mind, the most subtle aspect of mind. So we can use the definition of the mind as clear and knowing, but mainly to try to get an experience of the underlying knowing aspect of the mind. So beyond any conception or language or construction, any mental construction, just spend a minute or two trying to abide in that subtlest part of your mind. And you can bring your concentration back to the room. So if there's any questions or discussion people would like to have. So, yeah.
Using that example of today being a beautiful sunny day, a beautiful day, what would be a good use of that time? That's what I was thinking about, to contribute to our own karma and our own well-being, creating good karma. And I was thinking to really appreciate, practice gratitude in those moments, and maybe use that time to meditate and invite other people to have that experience.
Yeah. Yeah, so the question or the observation is about how to use the experience of a beautiful day like today. And so a few things mentioned there, like gratitude, absolutely, the thing. But also what you were saying there about, you have a good experience like that, and then to offer that, as a gift to others. Imagine offering that to other beings or to other people. So traditionally there's several things. One is, I think you can rejoice in your circumstances of having that thing, and then have a determination to use it wisely, and at the same moment recognizing how fragile it is, and how fragile your place is in that circumstance. So that's traditionally you'd call that the remembrance of impermanence and death, But these are all aspects that we can draw into that experience. And then also to see that it is the product of causes and conditions. And so long as those causes and conditions are there, I am experiencing this event, this circumstance. But they're not always going to be there.
So would it also be practice that mindful, being completely embracing of this moment, knowing it is not, it will not last?
You can do that, but also, like I walked into the park today and I stood under one of the big trees and I just stood there, and there was so many aspects of it we call just perfect. Like the breeze, there was a breeze coming in and I could just smell the lemon-scented gum in the distance. and it was warm, the sky was perfectly blue, and so whether that's indulgent, but just to the momentary beauty of that moment, the momentariness is something to experience as well. But I think a good practice is to offer it, to see it as perfect, and then think of giving it to others. Giving it to the Buddhas, or giving it to your teacher, giving it to your parents, or whatever, in terms of that experience. So I think they're all worthwhile things to do.
But if you talk about giving something like that, it's almost holding on to the thing.
No, the essence of giving is not holding on to it.
It's like, if you're going to give, like it's a moment, like it's a passing moment. So holding on to it's probably not right, but I find myself when I'm in those moments of beauty and peace and perfection, and all of that,
Yeah, so just in terms of that discussion that I think that's why we can be in that circumstance and we really grasp it as my moment, my happy moment. We're holding it, grasping onto it. And so this idea of giving it to others, offering it to others, is a way to diminish that grasping aspect. Because we can go stand in the park and look at the beautiful green grass and the blue sky and all that, and think this is my fantastic experience. So it's a grasping thing. So trying to remember to give it to others is a way of overcoming that grasping possessiveness. Like you build a big house and you wall off the beach and you say, this beach is mine and the view is mine, and you build up a big wall so nobody can see the view from the road, because this view is mine. It's problematic.
Would a more highly trained mind have equal reverence for the worst conditions a person would find himself in, and just be this is amazing as well?
Do you mean in terms of the experience?
All those
Yeah.
experiences things you're
Yeah, so the question's leading to this idea of equanimity, equanimity of mind. And one of the stories of the Buddha is that the Buddha's mind is so equanimous that one person could be massaging his arm with beautiful oil and perfume and thing, and another person is cutting the skin off him on the other arm, and that the Buddha's mind is completely equal towards both experiences and both people. With that, fully equanimous. So, for us to say, oh, it's raining today, I'm so depressed, this is awful, I had a picnic planned today and this is an absolute disaster, it's the worst thing that's ever happened to anybody. No, it's not. It's not. So an equanimous mind is one that thinks, okay, my plans are upset, I have to do something else, no problem. Not being too attached to the good circumstances and not being too sort of disastrous, thinking disaster for the poor circumstances. And
non-preferential as well,
ideally, ideally non-preferential in a way, so being, it's the absolute form of independence, that your experience is independent of the external circumstance. External circumstance, whether favourable or unfavourable, I am unmoved. So in Shantideva, there's the thing about, in the translation that we have here, it talks about being a block of wood. You remain like a block of wood in front of all circumstances. So probably a more correct translation of that is like a giant tree. Apparently the word for the word that's used actually means like a large tree. That in the wind, it bends or it moves or whatever, but it's undisturbed by the wind. Undisturbed in all circumstances. And so for us to be undisturbed by any external circumstance, good or bad, not swinging from incredible excitement to incredible unhappiness, to be and ideally to be, in a very good state, no matter what the circumstance. And so how do you do that? How do you get there to that point? So it's the question. Yeah. Sorry, I'm getting a little bit deaf as I'm getting older, unfortunately.
When actually doing a meditation, it's very quiet and calm and peaceful. And when in a real life situation, like suddenly we say, someone says something that can be very annoying, or maybe say something very offensive, or in that situation, how did you bring back yourself into that calm state and not be disturbed?
Yeah. So the question is about how to remain calm in the face of offensive words or disturbing words, insulting words, or other disturbing circumstances. And so, that's what this discussion is about developing an equanimous, an equal-minded attitude to whatever presents itself to us. So that's easier said than done. So let's say in terms of offensive words. So one of the meditational techniques that you can use is that if there's the person here is saying offensive words to you, to recognise that the aspect of offensiveness is something that you are creating onto the voice of the other person. Now, their mind may be wanting to hurt you, maybe, but in one sense, your experience is merely the sound. The sound is coming from that person and contacting your ear. And we can look at it scientifically. We can say that the sound pressure in the air is vibrating my eardrum, and that's creating electrical signals that are going into my brain and triggering all these things happening, and I call it offensive, right? So if we go down to that nuts and bolts of the physicality of it, we can say it's mere vibrating air, and it's neither offensive nor not offensive, unless I make it so. So that's a meditation that you can do for offensive images, offensive words, offensive pronouns, offensive anything, offensive writing. You know, when you write on a page, I do this when I take notes when I attend teachings. And I like this as a meditation. I've got my pen and I go, squiggle, squiggle, up, down, squiggle, thing, in, at, space, something. And I look at it and it means something. But the meaning is from my mind. You know, it's a very interesting thing that there's I've just scribbled something here which actually means nothing. But that also is from my mind, that it means nothing. You know, that's such an interesting meditation to do. You're writing and you just watch the pen move and all of a sudden there's meaning. Where did the meaning come from? It comes from your mind. So same with the insults. The meaning comes from your mind.
So you mean that's interpretation from yourself?
Is everything. Interpretation from yourself is everything. Irrespective of the other person's motive. Because do you know the other person's motive? You don't. You know, we can't read the other person's mind. We do not know their motive. And the life experience that we have is that somebody else was trying to be kind to us and we saw it as an insult. You know, that happens. It happens to me all the time. I don't know why. No, just joking. Yeah, so the question is about somebody maybe targeting us for trying to continually harm us, you know, somebody, you know, constantly harming us. Again, momentarily, to understand that the, you know, words, etc., even physical beating and stuff, in an absolute sense, I am the creator of that experience, right? So, we say that, and then so you might think, okay, I'm going to do this meditation and I'm going to generate great compassion for the person. Okay, so I'm generating great compassion for this person. That in itself does not make their anger go away. You know, like, and so if you're thinking, oh, I've just generated love and compassion towards you, why are you still angry at me? Well, you know, to some degree there's no connection there, you know. So, and I think this is where some of the great stories about, you know, people who are imprisoned in the Holocaust camps who came through that with only love and compassion for others, and seeing that as the only answer after many years of torture and difficulties, but maintaining their love and compassion. And similarly, many of the lamas in Tibet who were imprisoned, you know, maintained their love and compassion for their captors every day with that difficulty facing. So there's a couple of things there. One of them is, just because I generate a bit of love and compassion for everybody, it's silly to expect that all my problems will go away, because, and particularly from the point of view of cause and effect, I have created such a vast collection of different karmas, of all sorts of different karmas. I am to think I am not immune from any negative experience. I am not immune from any negative experience. And so one of the benefits of that thinking is that you never feel superior to somebody who's going through a really terrible circumstance or has done something really terrible. And you stand in judgment and say how terrible that is, because you should always think that I carry within me such a vast storehouse of previous actions that I am not immune from any suffering, And so that's another incentive to, from moment to moment, to try to practice well.
Anyone in an abusive situation should get out if they can afford to.
Absolutely, and there's absolutely. If you're in an abusive situation, if you're not in the same room as the person, it's difficult for them to abuse you. So absolutely, there are physical, realities to minimising your suffering. But I think to think that I can sit and meditate and generate love and compassion and all of my problems will instantly disappear, it's unlikely, very unlikely. Sorry? Well, look, these things come down to the individual to decide as to what they're capable of doing and what their circumstances will permit them to do and what is the most skillful thing to do. But, yeah, it's very difficult, Yeah. Look, these are the things that people are facing everywhere, every day, and we should understand that and generate compassion for them. It's getting a little bit late, so we'll just wrap up with a very quick dedication meditation. So just to think, all of us coming together, it's a very rare, unique thing, very special, and to meditate together and to think and to contemplate, very special. I think that takes the form of white light and it completely dissolves into you and fills your body and eliminates all of your problems, develops all your good qualities. And then imagine giving away that benefit to everybody else. Imagine rays of light emanating out to everybody else, relieving them of their suffering and their problems. And then that light returning and dissolving back into you. So thank you very much. Dennis will be back next week, and